Okay, this is my grandmother, Emily Chandler, and we're going to do an interview on poverty in America and her background as a minister. Can you first give us a little bit about your background with charity and poverty and stuff like that?
Well, the background's really a combination of being an ordained Presbyterian minister and a psychiatric nurse. And I would say that, most of what I know about poverty comes from working with people in the inner city, which is what I did when I was working at what was then Boston City Hospital, now Boston Medical Center. And I was part-time pastor of a little church in South Boston, which, as you can imagine, is not a bastion of Presbyterianism, but I was a part-time minister in a little church there. And I would say both in the area in Andrews Square, where the church was, and in the South End, on Albany Street, where Boston Medical Center was, there was a horrific amount of poverty. I mean, the thing that distressed me the most, I would say, when I was director of psych nursing there at the same time, was looking out my window, my office window, and I would see people lining up to go to the homeless shelter at Long Island. I mean, as if it were a solution. Though on nights when it was freezing cold, I mean, the city did try to provide a place for people to go. But it's discouraging, Brew. I'll tell you, it's discouraging because all the things we try to superimpose on people to make it all better come from our assumptions about what people want. I mean, more often than not, when you try to superimpose your lifestyle on people who are poor or people who are suffering, sometimes they resent it. They don't want you to take your lifestyle and lay it on them.
Yeah.
I think most of the time the problem has been that we haven't really asked people what they want or what they need, or asked people what happened, or listened to them. We sort of decide what they want instead of listening to what's happened. Mm-hmm. And every single one of them had a story. Nobody starts out that way. Well, they may if they grow, they're in a family. And I would say children growing up in poverty is a disaster. Unwed mothers and unwanted children is the biggest disaster because nobody's taking care of them. It's children having children.
Well, that was one of the, that was identified as one of the key groups of people that were poor was often women and children.
Yes.
Do you have any experience, specifically with, single mothers or women and children in poverty, and, how do they differentiate from families in poverty or single males?
Absolutely, because single males can get away from it. They can escape. Maybe they escape into all kinds of things that aren't very good for them. But the biggest problem with unwed mothers or with young women having children is that they're children themselves. Most of them are adolescents. And a lot of times they'll have a baby because they want someone to love them, not because they want to love someone. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And then of course that isn't what happens when you have a baby. It's a lot of work and it's a lot of stress and it's a lot of expense, and they get frustrated and angry, and the cycle starts all over again. You have a young child who wasn't wanted, who's frustrated, who doesn't get what he or she needs, and they grow up frustrated, angry, and the cycle starts all over again. And then they get to be teenagers, and then they use sex often as a replacement for feeling good, emotional feeling. And I used to tell the people of Boston City, all of these poor souls coming in pregnant, they were trying to get filled up with something. So they got filled up with a pregnancy. And then the cycle just starts all over again.
Yeah. Now, how would you consider the poverty crisis in America today in comparison with when you were in the heat of your involvement with poverty and soup kitchens, and when you were when you started becoming a minister? I think it was in the 80s, right?
It was. Well, I don't think it's gone away. It's probably worse. I don't have the stats at my fingertips, but I would bet you that the numbers are higher.
Okay.
Because if for no other reason, then the 90s were something of, a heyday in the United States, and things have gone steadily downhill since then, especially since the downturn the past few years. So it's worse. And instead of sort of people who the stereotype poverty-stricken family, now you have people who used to be middle class getting pushed down below the poverty level.
Okay. I think back when you were involved with charities and poverty and all that sort of stuff, it was mostly people that were in poverty were white or black. Nowadays, it's a lot of immigrants. Did you ever have any experience with like immigrants that came into the country thinking that America had like great promise, and then their dreams
Sure.
were squashed?
Oh, sure, they all do, starting with your own great-grandparents. My parents came from Canada. Well, they did. But I used to say to people, we could pass. We were white and we spoke English. But we still, both my parents came here with absolutely nothing. But when you're white and you speak English, you're a step ahead of the game. I mean, I thought to myself, one of the most moving things that ever happened to me in my life was the day I signed the register at Harvard Divinity School, where my mother came up here from Nova Scotia and was a governess when she was 17 years old. That you can do that when you're white and you speak English. Now, if you're Asian or you're Hispanic or you're black or if you're from some other culture and you come here when you're 17, I doubt that you would end up with a family at Harvard who, helped you and coached you and allowed you to be in a position to raise children and grandchildren. So in 2 or 3 generations, everyone in the family is going to college.
Yep.
I mean, it's a tough situation. Not speaking a language is a problem, and I'm not so sure that I think it's so good that we don't insist on people learning English. If they don't learn English, they don't have a prayer. They don't have a prayer of succeeding.
Okay. What does the Presbyterian Church teach with treating the poor and the poverty stricken, and what kind of goals do they put in place to stop poverty?
Oh, there are huge efforts going on. Huge. The churches in this country, I think all the denominations, the Roman Catholic Church, the Protestant denominations, all have been taking care of the poverty-stricken historically for years. I mean, the Catholic Church itself started hospitals, the Sisters of Mercy, all the women religious were the people who took care, and they're still taking care of the people who are poor and the people who are sick and the kids and the women and the people who are sort of down and out. That's one of the things the church does best, frankly, because there's nothing to be gained when businesses do it or when NGOs do it or nonprofits do it. Very often they're looking for funding. The church is just doing it.
Okay.
And they still have lots of programs.
Okay. Could just to wrap it up, could you give like an example of like a sermon or a scripture passage that you used to teach about treating the poverty or the poor people or the poverty-stricken?
That's easy. Matthew 25. When you do it unto the least of these, my brethren, you do it unto me.
All right.
You know that one? Look it up. Boy.
No, I do. All right. Thanks, Danny.
All right,